Hello, everyone. It's Lily Mott, and welcome to another episode of The Political Dispatch, the podcast that explores big issues and ideas in a conversational way. This episode is the second part in a two-part series where my co-hosts, Tom Spare, Sid Kurapati, and I talked with Amelia Southern Uribe and Bryson Austin. Amelia and Bryson are both students at the University of Arkansas, as well as two of the newest podcasters on Be the Change Media Network. They will soon be launching their own podcast, The Ozark Agenda, which is an anti-capitalist and pro-people podcast where the global fight against fascism meets Ozark resistance. So, we wanted to take this opportunity to talk with Bryson and Amelia and do a deep dive into US politics, specifically what life is like in the United States now that Donald Trump is back in office. If you haven't listened to part 1 of this series, please go and listen to that episode now. It is linked in the description of this episode, and it will provide you with more context for the second half of our discussion, which I'm about to play for you right now. Please enjoy part 2 of this Political Dispatch series, Living in Trump's America. Lots of amazing points. Just listening to you guys, I think there's so much to be concerned about right now. I'm so glad that you were able to come on and share this with our audience. I have a big question for this next one, and I think this is something that I have thought a lot about because we talked about it a little bit, but I think I'm similar to you guys where the first Trump administration was when I started to think about politics. And for me, I wasn't entirely aware of all of the policies and what was going on, but I vividly remember the day that Donald Trump was elected. I vividly remember just watching the screen and my family's reactions, and I actually wrote my college admissions essay on that. So that was just such an emotional moment, and I think it's reliving it now, right? That's that's what a lot of us are doing. What are your thoughts on the differences between the first Trump administration and now? I think there's a lot of ways that we could talk about this. Media coverage of the first Trump administration, whether that's traditional media or whether that's social media. I think I've seen a lot of changes in especially the way that young people are interacting with politics. I'm just going to put that question out there. Take it in whatever way makes sense for you guys. But Sid, Tom, also, if you guys are thinking about those differences, would love to hear your thoughts, especially being in different parts of the world.
So 2016, let's see, I'm going to out myself. During the 2016 election, I remember, I say when I tell this story, I was a Republican for about 2 months. But I remember watching Donald Trump as a kid, and I loved The Apprentice. It was just funny, right? And I didn't really think of him as a businessman. I thought of him as a character. And so when he started running and I was watching him on TV, it was this new brand of politics. I was like 9 or 10, but I remember I hated no, I was about 12 or 13. I remember hating kind of the politician way of doing politics because they all were mealy mouthed, kind of Ivy League educated, idiots to me. And so his brashness and his honesty was what I knew in my personal life, is what I knew from my family. And I got a lot of crap from my family for that. And then I'm from Arkansas, so the Clintons have always been a big part of my life. So when I saw that Hillary was running, I was like, oh my God, here's this woman. She's a Democrat. She's connected to Arkansas. Love. So I jumped on that bandwagon. And when he was elected, let's see if I remember how I felt that day. I remember watching the returns come in, and specifically the moment when Pennsylvania was about 80% decided, but Trump was up about 1 million votes. And I remember the media so desperately saying, she still has a chance. She still has a chance. And then I recalled what the election in 2012 felt like. And I was like, this is not how they were behaving in 2012. They were so confident. And Obama was, everybody was scared, but people kind of knew that was just because we had a really good challenger. But this was different. And so he was elected. I went to sleep and I was like, I know what I'm going to wake up into. But what I didn't understand was that the next 4 years, I would spend every day reading about the president. Because before then, Obama, this is something true about presidents before, you didn't really care about them day to day. But Trump was a different kind of president. He would, be tweeting from the toilet at 2 o'clock in the morning. He'd tweet at lunchtime. He'd tweet before you ate dinner. He was constant. He was constantly in our minds. He was constantly in just the zeitgeist, and everybody knew what he was doing. And so you saw this kind of the resistance build up, and the resistance bled into even late night hosts constantly talk about him. And I was a big Conan O'Brien fan, and then I switched over to Stephen Colbert once Conan was gone. But the first time around, he was surprised. Nobody expected him to win. And there's reporting that he didn't expect to win, that when they were watching the returns, he was like, oh, this is crazy, because it was a money grab. It was a popularity contest, right? He didn't expect to beat an established politician who, was so dominant in the Democratic Party, had been Secretary of State, had been the First Lady. So he came in unprepared, and he was just kind of doing things, right? And the Supreme Court shot down his immigration executive order, the Muslim ban. They said you can't call it a Muslim ban, dude. That's a little racist, it's a little out there. And he said, okay, let me tweak it. They went back. They still did a Muslim ban essentially, but they listened to the court in that vein. He listened to the courts. I think they played a very slow game. It wasn't the kind of, move fast, break things, Silicon Valley movement. It was just undermining our system in a way that felt normal. But what he was doing was breaking laws on a nearly daily basis and breaking norms all the time. And like I said earlier, that first term, he was everything that we thought was kind of presidents didn't do or presidents did do. He tore it up because he did not care about being an American president. He was a president for the right. Then we get to COVID, right? And COVID's the only reason that Joe Biden was able to defeat Donald Trump. That's my opinion, at least. And he loses. And I watched a documentary on Hulu about the campaign and how, even during COVID, they were having these huge rallies, and he was feeding off the energy of the crowd. And he really, really thought that he was going to win. His family thought that he was going to win. So we come to election day, right? And we don't get the results. So then that opens the door to ask questions, right? I thought it was very normal. Sometimes election results don't come in immediately, and Georgia goes blue. That's different. And we get two senators out of Georgia, and he spends from election day to January 6th just saying that he didn't lose. This is where Trump changes. Before, when he won, right, he didn't have a reason to want to tear the system apart because the system was why he got elected. It was why he was in power. It was why he was able to enrich his family by having the Secret Service and foreign leaders stay at his hotels, right? So January 6th happens, and he's supposed to be a pariah. He gets kicked off all the social media. Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell, they basically say that we're done with him. But then he comes back. And now he's the president for the right again. This time they were prepared. They had 4 years to prepare a package of the most damaging things they could and the most damaging strategies they could. And so now they were ready, but the Democrats weren't ready. So he's come in and signed hundreds of executive orders. And Steve Bannon, who is a close advisor of his, who he pardoned from committing fraud against Trump voters, right, has said that their strategy is basically everything, everywhere, all at once. Throw as much as the walls as you possibly can, overload the media, overload the Democrats, overload the courts. They can't fight everything. And they'll spend so much time fighting the most salacious stuff that the undertone will go unnoticed. The undertone this time is not, just like I'm Trump, I want to do whatever. It is we fundamentally do not want the government to work ever again. That is why they are gutting everything. That is why they want to isolate us so that he can retain power within himself. He wants to hold on to his power. And so I hear a lot of people talking about the midterms and the next election. It won't happen because he doesn't want to leave. He wants to be in control, and he wants people to feel like he is the only one that can solve the issues that he is creating. He wants to burn the system down so that people feel pain, but they will be helpless. And he is instilling helplessness and fear so that everybody gives up and it is just him. He wants it to just be him. But he's not even really responsible for it, right? Because he's golfing. It's Elon Musk who's at the table. And I recently heard a podcast. They were talking about this guy named Curtis Yarvin. I don't know if y'all have ever heard of Curtis Yarvin. Please look him up. He's a freak. He is basically like the shaman for the Silicon Valley guys. His idea of a perfect society is that we all live in these kind of big tech cities that are corporations, and you can't move away. There's no police. There's just constant surveillance, and basically, if you commit crimes, you get killed. But their goal was we need a tech dictator to buy the president and do what the president is supposed to do, but have a president be a puppet. And that's what they're doing. We already live under a dictatorship in a way. Elon Musk controls it all. He's going to do whatever he wants, and nobody is there to stop him. So that is the difference, that they have come in with a plan to destroy America this time, and they didn't have that last time.
Yeah, just to briefly add, that that's such a comprehensive, I feel like, overview of leading up to how we got here. And I think as we move forward, that I think it's important to acknowledge what Bryson just said. They do have a plan. And as they are strategic, so does our movements have to be. They have spent the last 4 years, if not many more, funding and being in cahoots with big oil, big pharma, and beyond. And so as their strategy has increased, I think so does the opposition. So just wanted to briefly add that on.
If I may, just an addendum, this has been a multi-decade process in a way. The Heritage Foundation has spent the past 50 years, give or take, buying our courts, systematically taking over our courts, because they realized that the way to do whatever they want is to have somebody with institutional power saying that it is all legal, it's all fair. They've already done it at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has said that essentially administrative agencies have no power unless the president specifically says they do. But that fundamentally gets rid of the point of administrative agencies. The executive branch is supposed to appoint heads of it, and they're supposed to do the bidding of Congress and the people. But now they're saying, the EPA they can't even regulate sewage. That is this like the slow subverting of our entire system, destroying our democracy through gerrymandering and voter suppression. They want to dismantle democracy for corporations. That is why they bought and paid, and they have so much money being thrown behind them. It's because they want corporations to be able to profit in an unlimited manner and to be able to control this country so that they can do whatever they want. And the billionaires have also gotten that, if we buy the politicians, if we wage the class war while we also buy the media and tell the people there's no class war, this is business as usual. This is partisanship. Just keep fighting each other and don't worry about the people who are stealing out of your pocket. They will completely disrupt and destroy our democracy and make us just a corporatist state. And the head corporation that does the worst criminality, commits the worst criminality, will be the government.
Yeah, thanks for that overview, Bryson. I think it demonstrates the starkness of the huge challenges that America's facing. I wonder, this might be, I'll ask this anyway, or I'll just put the point out there. Isn't what's going on at the moment perhaps the true face of America? Isn't a lot of the things that are happening, isn't it just a tale as old as time, really? That's sort of a point I wanted to get across a bit. But also, going back to an earlier point, I was so surprised how quickly DEI and other policies evaporated, right? After 50 years of progress and slogging and campaigning and all that sort of thing, it just disappears. And I think it says so much about, well, we can rely on the elected folks to keep things going. We can rely on the courts. It's not my responsibility. I don't have to be involved here. And when I went out to the US in October and November, and my observation was as I was in DC on voting day, was is this what it was like to be in the dying days of the Roman Empire, right? Is this what it felt like? And I think I think it says a lot about America's time in the world. I thought that the idea of what I thought America was perhaps never existed. Maybe it was just a sort of a myth that was presented to me in very simplistic terms about American history. But also then there was a little bit of hope too in pockets, right? So I went to Atlanta. I went to see that, Martin Luther King, his house and where he grew up and all that sort of stuff. And I went to the Jimmy Carter Presidential Center. And I thought, wow, these are two decent men that managed to change the course of history in different ways in a southern state and sort of led the charge. But then also reflecting on the changes that have happened under Trump. I remember 2012, I was a student, I was an undergraduate, and we watched the election results come in. We had one room that was CNN, the other room was the BBC or something, and we stayed up all night. Even security came in and they started watching as well because they'd never seen like presidential election before. And then 4 years later, I was in students' union. I was working for a students' union, and I was a friend of mine, and we were excited. We'd been talking for months about the election, and then result came in, and it was just like, whoa, this is out of the blue. I don't understand how this has happened. Bearing in mind, a few months earlier, Brexit had happened, right? So there's this link between what happened in Brexit. A lot of the techniques that were used helped Trump get elected. And then to be there for Trump 2.0 when the election came through, I wasn't surprised at all that he won. I was surprised that he made gains in every single state, but I wasn't surprised that I thought he was going to win sort of a similar way that he did in 2016. I was surprised he won the popular vote. But I guess we're all so much more in our own bubbles now, right? So we're a lot more sort of aggregated into particular parts. But my feeling on it all is that I think this is the fundamental flaws in the American system, is that the country is reliant on a 18th century model of politics and government, and it hasn't really been updated in that time. And actually, what people hark back to, founding fathers and all that sort of business, is these folks are going to be in this place and these folks are going to be in another place, and everyone should just sort of get on with it. Very much like a lot of the conservatives feel like that operate in the UK. Yeah, they're my thoughts. Yeah.
That was quite spot on, Tom. And Bryson really succinctly sort of put together everything that I guess a lot of us, people who are observing American politics very closely, kind of see the patterns as well. I completely agree with Tom when he says that it's not surprising. It's definitely not surprising. You hope that the other candidate wins, but you kind of know somewhere that, hey, it's quite likely he's going to be winning this. Yeah, I think they have a very strong strategy. There are very similar patterns in terms of how his administration is forcing the executive actions. It's a lot more strategic. It's not random. It doesn't seem random anymore. It's systematic. And I don't know about how much of the system they're going to change, but they're definitely trying to dismantle politics as we know. They're trying to, if you look at the pattern, they're trying to basically break down every single sort of traditional way of doing things, even in, like, say, diplomacy and world order, or military alliances that have existed, or old friendships that have existed. He's changing the equation. He tried to do that in his first term as well, and he's trying to do that more so now. It's his inherent need to show who's boss, right? The other thing that's changed in this election is the lobbying groups. I think so far, if you go back like 50 years or whatever, you had big tobacco. You had the companies that had a lot more influence and whatnot, and just raw cash power. And you've seen how the terms have changed. Like in this podcast episode, or we've seen that there is big agro. Then we have had, Bryson's mentioned big tech, and like the earlier terms were big tobacco and so on, and big pharma is another one. So I think there is a certain convergence of where the power lies or where the mood is in the country, and there's a sort of survivalist kind of an attitude that, hey, okay, this is where the country's going, I'm going to schmooze with this side of the aisle now. And then when they see that it's going this side, and then they'll be like, hello, I was always blue. And as someone from India, this is something which we've seen quite a bit. So we're a bit agnostic about this because we know that they will always swing towards where the power is. What's really troubling is how the system is being eroded now. And I wanted to go back to one point which Amelia made in one of the earlier questions, that fascism is now, right? A lot of people think that fascism comes as a big announcement, and they pass a law and then they officially declare, the leader says, we are fascist. That's not how it happens. It creeps in right in front of your eyes every single day. And that's pretty much what's happening in a lot of countries, a lot of so-called democratic countries. So why is the US very different? Because it's the only superpower left in the world, and it holds a lot of influence. And you can see the shift in the global political narrative now once he's been in power. You see some leaders are like, you know, hey, buddy, and others are taking a more stronger stance. Like Europe is taking a stronger stance this time than last time. They're trying to ensure that there's a certain kind of a dialogue, because they're meeting similar resistance at home, very similar ideology as to what Trump 2.0 represents. But that's just one side of it. And I'll just quickly wrap up my point, because the other side of it is that the Democrats have got no clue right now what to do. It's true. They're struggling. Unfortunately, they're struggling. And they definitely weren't prepared for this election. If you look at the data, I mean, they lost more than what they gained in the swing states. They lost a lot, which basically means in the next election, not the midterms, but in the next presidential election, they'll have to up their efforts at least 3 times just to gain back what they lost. And unlike, say, other democratic electoral systems, you could still win the popular vote and lose the presidency in the US, which is something which I've never understood. How can you do that? But which basically means you need to win a few states which are unwinnable. And that's going to be a very difficult task because everything is kind of converging the Republican way, which which leaves me with the question that, is the Republican Party still Republican? I don't think so. I don't think they really stand for right-wing politics anymore, because it's more than just a particular way of doing business or a particular ideology on certain policy matters. It's changed. So I don't know what the definition of this current Republican Party is anymore. So that's a question which I've been thinking about, from an Indian context, from a European context, from a UK context as well. And it's a bit of, food for thought.
I wanted to add something because I felt like I haven't really touched on this question in the way that I wanted to yet. And Tom's response made me think about and connect with me so much that this has and continues to be America's true face. It is essential that we face that truth. And I want to say thank you so much to Tom for bringing that up, because the truth about this country is that this has always been America KKK. That has been said by the Brown Berets and the Black Panthers. This country is built off of white supremacy, and that is what I was thinking as you were speaking, Sid, that the true face of the Republican Party is white supremacy. It is the connections to racialized violence. And I still see that today in Arkansas. I mean, in Harrison is a city close to us in Arkansas that is known as America's most racist town. That's where the KKK's headquarters are. That this has been building up from the ground up, that it's not just an oppressive system or designed to be targeting DEI or targeting, the next scapegoat, but it is the very nature of what America was founded on. It was never about freedom. It was always about control, violence, colonialism, extraction, not just on our land, but from our bodies, our labor, and our resources, predominantly those that are Black and brown bodies. And I think what we're now just seeing is the reflection of an old system of exploitation that has been unveiled. And that system has been unveiled to many Black and brown bodies for many centuries. But now we're seeing that it is no longer disguised and it actually is perceived. And I think in some entirety that wasn't by white Americans or by communities that weren't affected by the civil rights movements or the Chicano movement or so on. And I think naming that this empire has never hesitated to show its true face to the global South either. This relationship that we have continued to tarnish with our brothers in arms, our sisters in fight for liberation in the global South, that's how they treat people. They have America's hands. When I say they, I mean America's leaders. Hands are soaked in blood from the Philippines to South America to the Middle East, and we still see that today. And their overthrowing of democratically elected leaders, the resource theft, and the destabilization is something that's affected my family. Colombia's and America's relationship was deeply tied to the drug war that was infiltrated and started by America. And it has always been in the name about preserving American wealth, power, and control. And that same system is oppressing us now and has oppressed us for decades, if not centuries. And so I think that's clear to say, whether it happens on US soil or the global South, that what's happening now is not new. But going back to what Tom said earlier, I felt that. And I feel it today, that I feel that America is a dying empire and it's grasping at its last breath. And we've been around for almost 250 years, and I'm sure we've all heard that. That's when an empire dies, 250 years. So I think we know as people that live in the US, people that have been tried with these versions of Trump's policies and executive orders, that the America that we know or have known started in the South with oppressive regimes. It started with the oppression of Black and brown bodies. It started with slavery. It started with immigrants coming here to be exploited for their labor. But as Fred Hampton said, one of the influential figures in the civil rights movements, you can kill a revolutionary, but you can't kill a revolution. And I think that's important to say, that this is not the death of America, period. Maybe it's the death of the American empire, but maybe this is an opportunity where we can see this radical change, where we can find hope in what we have endured. And it seems like a long shot, but I think that hope is the discipline right now. And I wanted to state that too, that it's our time to reside in our unity, our power, and collective action, because as days go on, as hours go on, as weeks go on, every single person will be impacted by this violent system here and abroad.
The other thing which I just wanted to say was that one of the other reasons why I think the Democrats lost is that they had to spend a lot of time fixing a lot of things which happened in the first term of Trump's. And they did it the old-fashioned way, which takes time, which is actually the good way of doing it, because you know you take time and you figure out the implications of things, and you try and fix it. But what happens in that situation is that once the first term ended and they elected Joe Biden, the expectations were so high from the American public, in some ways, both sides of the aisle, that that Joe Biden will bring back the decency to the office, and all of that and everything. when you raise the expectations on the bar so high, and if you don't live up to it, or even if you don't get close to it, it really disappoints people. And right now, the US economy is doing well. They spent like 4 years fixing the economy to quite an extent. I think there are certain things which are still yet to be fixed, but they did fix quite a bit. And now the next president, who is Donald Trump, will get to claim that I'm here, so it's doing well, it's doing fine. The point that I'm getting to is that what is the succession plan, or who's going to be, going for, because this is his final term, who's going to be, standing up next? Is JD Vance somebody who is actually shaping up to be his protege and trying to be, a younger alternative to Trump and having similar values and sort of similar system and whatnot? And how do the Democrats actually go ahead and counter something like that, which takes a lot of grassroots level politics. They have to go back to the roots. That's how you sort of build a movement again. And you got to really capitalize on something that you basically need about 51% or 49% of the vote, roughly close to that, to actually clinch this. And you need to go out of your way to get somebody absolutely new, somebody who's got really fresh ideas, somebody who can work with both sides of the aisle, not somebody who's on the other end of the aisle. And that's how you actually try and get some semblance of sanity in the society, let alone the system. System can be fixed over a period of time. You got to give sanity to the society right now. And yeah, I think it's going to happen.
Okay, I think I'll jump in here. I think that Sid, that was a good segue, but also before when Amelia was talking about hope, that's huge. And I think Sid, you were also talking about looking to the future, just what's coming next. I think that's so natural for all of us who might be really concerned, just to be thinking about, is there light on the horizon? What can we look forward to? What can we as individuals be doing? What can organizations be doing? I think a lot of people might be feeling disillusioned, hopeless. What advice, Amelia and Bryson, what advice would you want to share with specifically Americans who might be listening to this podcast and feeling those feelings, disillusionment, disheartened by what's happening in their country right now? I'd love to know your thoughts and maybe some advice that you guys have for people who might be feeling this way.
I love this question, and I think that knowing and embracing, first of all, that hope is a discipline, and that is what gets us through these authoritarianist times and fascist times. But the advice I would give is to start local. Local change is what allows us to not only push the movement forward, but to feel connected. And during this time, fascists and the powers that be want us to feel overwhelmed. They want us to feel isolated. They want us to feel scared and embrace that fear as a reason to be paralyzed. When we embrace community, when we find joy, when we find the ability to connect with each other over board games, over dinner, over drinks, we are able to feel rooted in that. And so my two pieces of advice is start local. And when you start local, don't try to get involved in every issue and every movement, but rather find your niche. Find your passion and find what makes you happy and channel these feelings of anger, of disillusionment, and frustration. And for me, that's environmental justice. For me, that's embracing the intersection of labor and climate organizing and finding ways that we can tackle fossil fuels. But at the same time, I also know that Bryson and I are young. I'm about to be 22, I'm 21, and embrace that. Embrace where you are in your life and have fun with it. Find joy, even if that means stepping away from the movement for a second. There's nothing wrong with that. There's people that will do the work, don't burn out, but find this anger, tap into it, but also tap into joy.
Yeah, I love that. And I would say that Amelia has been a godsend for me. I don't know where I would be without them in this moment because they've helped me keep my head on straight and really experience joy in this time where there doesn't seem like a lot of cause for it. I will say to the people who aren't awake yet, wake up. You're next. If you're not one of the frontline uh, people, you will be next. If you are rich and you're powerful and this really doesn't affect you, again, there can only be one in authoritarianism. There can only be one. There is no disagreement. There's no, I want to do this. No, you have to be willing to bow down. And if you are not willing to bow down for your values and for your rights, then you need to wake up now. For the people who are awake and who are feeling disillusioned and who are feeling powerless and hopeless, and you want to cry and you want to curl up in a ball and stay at home, get up, quit crying. Don't let them see you cry, and do something. Get involved locally. Go to your city council, yell at those people, make them do the things that are good for your community. Find people that you can fellowship with. And like Amelia said, find ways to have fun, fellowship, and then go through do the things that are hard. Then go do the things that take your battery being charged for you to fight for the people in your community and for the people in the broader world. I will say for Americans, we have been exemplars in a lot of ways and we've messed up in a lot of ways. But right now is the time that we stand up and we say that we're not going to stand for our country falling to this BS because it is BS. What they want us to do is hate each other and become more divided, and for the poor to become poorer, and for the Silicon Valley people to keep winning. They've already won. What have you won? What are you winning? What are you willing to sacrifice and to work on saving our democracy and work on saving what remnants of power that we have left? So, and my greatest piece of advice is have hope and find love. Find what you love, find who you love. And I don't mean romantically. We as a society need to start loving other human beings. If you cannot see the people in Palestine as your brothers, your sisters, your mother, your father, your cousins, there's something wrong because they are people and they've done nothing wrong. So find whatever it is you need to find within yourself to be able to love other human beings for who they are because they are.
Lily, I think you should also give some advice.
Yeah, that one's tricky. I think that I can't follow that. That's tricky, Sid. Thank you. I think that my best advice is along the lines of Bryson's. I think finding joy and doing things that you love and that you can ways that you can find your peace are moments of protest as well. I think that that's really important to point out. I think that it can get so exhausting to watch the news these days to do this work. And I think it's just as important for you to find communities of support and for you to find hobbies and just things that recharge your battery. I think that's so important, like Bryson said. I think the other thing is do what you can do. At this time, even the small actions like you feel might not be making that much of a difference, they are. And I totally believe in a ripple effect. So if someone is listening to this podcast right now and something that we said inspires you, listen to more. Tell your friends. Share this. This is not just a plug for our podcast episode. I think that there are so many ways that we can create a ripple effect of change, and it just takes one person to stand up, post that thing on your Instagram. Even though you might not think it'll make that much of a difference, you never know. Right now, just all of us need to take those small moments, do those small actions, live our lives the best that we can every day, and I think we'll get back to good. I'm gonna end with a note of hope here. I think that it's just gonna take all of us doing small acts of bravery, small acts of kindness every day, just finding that good, finding that happiness, finding that peace. And I think that our wrap up today is a great way to get started with that.
Absolutely, Lily. And that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you so much, Amelia and Bryson, for joining us on the Political Dispatch. Seriously, this was a great set of episodes that we recorded as we unpack these critical issues. Can you tell our listeners a bit more about your upcoming podcast and how they can get connected and follow along with your work?
Yeah, if I may, I'd like to start by sharing an interpolation of the Bible as a prayer for hope. I'm not religious, but I find comfort in seeing holy books as works of philosophy. And I find this prayer to be quite poetic by itself. But a prayer for hope. To the people of earth, I maintain my hope in you, and I hold on to the assurance that what I am working for is already accomplished in the name of justice. Jesus said, "No good thing does he withhold from those that walk upright." I work to create what our Mother Earth would see as a good thing. Do not give up hope. I do not know who you are, but I love you. Justice is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. My vision of justice is my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield, and the horn of my salvation and my stronghold. Once again, thank you from the bottom of my heart for the opportunity that you've given us, the conversations that you have on this podcast and that we have on ours are exactly what the world needs right now. To the listeners tuning in from democracies to autocracies, we see you and we want you to know that there is hope. Once upon a time, there was no voting, and everyone lived under the thumb of monarchs who gallivanted around in unearned adornments. And now billions of people live in systems where they have some say in their government's operations. No one can take your hope away. That's a choice that you have to make. And the second you give up hope is the second it will give up on you. Be sure to follow us at the Ozark Agenda on Instagram. On Instagram, I am Bryson Austin. IAMBRYSON AUSTIN. And yeah, thank you so much, Amelia.
And I just wanted to add to that beautiful prayer and statement that if you liked what we're talking about, if you like these pieces of hope and calls to action where we tell you how to organize, educate, and mobilize, make sure not to only follow us, but to tell us what you want to hear from us. We have a forum in our bio where we want to connect our local struggle to a global liberation fight. The revolution is not a one-time thing, it's a lifelong commitment. And you might not see it all change in your lifetime, but every step we take forward is a step towards progress. Every voice raised is a part of the chorus, and even when they try to silence us, even when they try to break us down, we will keep fighting because we know that in the end, the people will win. So thank you for this opportunity, Lily, Tom, and Sid. Bryson, it's always a pleasure to be with you, to be in this movement with you. And one thing they can never take away from us is our power when we come together. And on Instagram, it's just Amelia Southern with 3 N's.
Amazing. We will include all of that in the description of the episode too, so everybody can check that out as they're listening. Thank you both for coming on the show. I am so excited to see the Ozark Agenda come to life. I cannot wait to support you in that. I cannot wait to listen to those episodes. That was a great way to wrap up this week's episode, or I guess it'll be 2 weeks' episodes of the Political Dispatch. As always, we'd love to hear your thoughts on our episodes. Please subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating or a comment wherever you're listening now.
Thanks, everyone. See you next time on the Political Dispatch.